Good afternoon, everyone. I am Reverend Jon Owens with Confirm Not Conform, and today I am here to talk with Stephanie Caro from Ministry Architects, one of our partners that you often find in our emails. And today we're going to talk a little bit just about confirmation in general and what does it look like. Stephanie works with many churches across the nation on youth programs and how to make youth ministry more innovative and sustainable in churches. So with that, Stephanie, why don't you talk to us a little bit about when you were a youth minister, how did you teach confirmation?
How I taught confirmation was very influenced by my own confirmation experience growing up. So never mind what year that was, but it might have had a 1, 9, and 7 in front of it. I went through confirmation. My dad was a pastor, but he wasn't my confirmation teacher. I actually went through confirmation at a different church. And it was extremely boring, felt meaningless to me. I hated going. And the only reason I kept going was because, one, it was going to make my dad happy for me to go through confirmation. And two, because I wanted the promised new dress and cake on my confirmation day. So I was highly motivated by outside external forces. So how I taught confirmation was, I took this class by a wonderful, wonderful teacher named Dr. Roland Martinson, and at Luther Seminary, I think, in Minnesota. And I just remember him saying, Scripture is full of experiences. We should be teaching our children in experiential how to get inside the story. And I really took that to heart. And so when I looked at the things we wanted confirmation to accomplish, the stories, the scriptures, the things about Jesus, even in our own faith traditions, I decided I never wanted to have a single confirmation class be sitting around a table. And so I, back in the 1980s or something like that, wrote because there wasn't a whole lot of choices back then. There wasn't a whole lot in the 1980s or 1990s. I know you're probably all rolling your eyes at me because that was like 40 years ago. But there wasn't a whole lot of choices like confirm, not conform. And so I wrote something that was very experiential. If we were going to learn about baptism, well, then let's do it by a riverside or a lakeside. If we were going to learn about resurrection, we did it in a cemetery. If we were going to talk about the upper room, we did it in an upper room with the meal set. And Dr. Martinson was right. That changed the whole confirmation process for me. And even still today, it's really what I like about what y'all with CNC are doing. It's experiential. You can dig in it. You can be up inside the story. So that's kind of what influenced me and how I taught confirmation.
Yeah, so you come from the United Methodist tradition, but in Ministry Architects, you work across all sorts of different denominations.
Yeah, right.
And so, in looking, you've gotten a taste of CNC, but how have you seen confirmation evolve over the years in churches?
So, do you want me to say the nice thing, or do you want me to say the truthful thing?
Well, let's hear both.
How about if I say the truthful thing nicely?
Okay.
Confirmation through the 90s, the 2000s, maybe even part of the 2010s, still had the punch of families wanting their kids to go through it, if for no other reason than, by George, I had to do it and you're going to have to do it too. But as we in the 2010s saw less and less millennials, and then as the Gen Zs are growing into familyness, as we begin to see less and less families participate in the life of a church on an active basis, we're seeing participation in confirmation decrease. And it's not just a mere numbers game, though that's part of it. The other thing is I think families are not valuing the rite of passage that confirmation can be. They see other ways they'd rather spend their time that perhaps bring more value to their family unit. And so I am thinking, and this is the part that's probably not easy to say, but I'm thinking that we're going to find in the next 10 years, confirmation could fade out in many churches. Not that anyone's saying it's not great and that it doesn't have a wonderful place, but I think that we're going to see less and less people even really want to send their kids because it doesn't have that same punch, that same reason. So
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I think for years the church has struggled with the idea of what confirmation is. And, because the more mainline denominations, we do baptism at infancy, which is a holdover from, infant mortality rates or anything.
Right.
And yet you deal with like our more evangelical brothers and sisters where, the act is to do baptism after they've committed in some way, shape, or form their life to Christ per se. And so I think there's a good conversation maybe in the future about, do we bring baptism back to the fold of actually at the age of consent per se?
At the age of
where the kids say, I want this for myself. And that's sort of what we say what confirmation is, right? But why not actually make baptism the actual moment, as opposed to this cute service with the baby that the parents make, and hopefully you hope that they show up after they baptize the kid.
Right.
They sometimes disappear right after that rite of passage.
Right. And you don't see them again until confirmation.
Yeah. And so, I think there's something to be said, but what it comes down to is, what is the commitment level, and what does the child or the teenager, in most of this case, I hate to call teenagers children, but what are they deciding for themselves without pressure? Because that's what CNC is about deciding what's right for them. So they're confirming, not conforming to an ideology. And so I think that's a real challenge for the churches to figure out what their role is in helping decide that. And so I'm curious, how do you think you're going to see this evolve over the years? You've kind of hinted a little bit about, less and less programs, fewer and fewer kids. What do you think confirmation, how do you think it could evolve?
I think churches are going to see one of two things happen, and there could be more things, but I'm just thinking of two things right now. I think one thing will be that we'll see, as I said, many families start to not choose the confirmation process. I mean, let's face it, from info from the latest census shows that it's considered active church attendance if a family goes once every 5 to 6 weeks. So a weekly type of experience is harder and harder to get families to commit to. So I think we'll see either one option, one road will be less people participating. However, I do think churches that choose to celebrate even more milestones, not just formal rites of passage like baptism or confirmation, but churches that develop the system of celebrating and embracing children and youth in some of their just normal life moments, both in fun ways or in traditional blessed with the water baptism ways. Those are going to be ones that connect a family more to the confirmation process. If celebrating moments has become a natural rhythm within that family. Now, I'll give you some examples. Informal ways. I've told this example. I know a church that every time a little 5-year-old loses their first tooth, about that time, kindergarten or so, you lose your first tooth. They get to go to the sound guy in the back of the church who takes a picture of that little smiley, toothless face, and it goes in the scrolling announcements before worship. Now, it's an easy little milestone, but what if these families raise their children in a church that seems to care about the steps of a child? And it has to be more than a baptism that they can't remember because they were babies. And it has to be more than a boring confirmation class, but celebrated things like, hey, I finally got my driver's license, or celebrated, I am going off to college. How do I wash my own clothes? How do I use a washing machine? And I think that could be a choice that churches made that will allow us to counteract that horrible attrition rate, loss rate after confirmation. Before the pandemic, the loss rate was estimated at being around 70%, 69, 70%. I am sure that rate is even more than that. If kids were going to confirmation at all. And so the more we can create a culture where the child just expects to be connected at all key moments, the more at least they'll touch base within the church. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it reminded me of my own childhood in the church youth group. I remember our priest made it a point to make a rite of passage the driver's license. When you got your driver's license or your learner's permit, you were brought in front of the church, and she blessed our hands for the control of the steering and blessed our eyes. And so again, we see and focus, and that was a thing in my church, actually.
I know a church that sets up little photo op spaces on their church property, because it's a really pretty church, and they set up photo op places so that all the prom kids on prom weekend can come and have their pictures taken in these pretty spots, and church folks are there to take, to hold all the cameras and take all the pictures and do that while the kids are posing. What a message that would send to a community. Hey, I may not exactly know what this whole God church thing is, but you cared enough to invite me in and care about my big moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thought. And thinking about that, you brought up something earlier again about kids and different things, different roles and time periods. And what I'm really curious about is, what do you think the role of confirmation is in general youth ministry? Because you have those who are just going for the youth ministry. There are those who just go to confirmation, and those kids don't always intermix. And so what is that role of?
That's a great question. I think when you've got kids that are in confirmation, like you said, and then kids over here that are in youth ministry, and I hear a pastor or a youth pastor say, you know, they graduated from confirmation, they went through confirmation, but they just never connected to the youth ministry. I don't say this to the pastor or youth pastor, but generally, if I could say what I wanted, I would say it's probably your fault. And not really personally, but the reason is we don't take a good enough look at how we're expecting integration. We we just assume our kids are going to make the jump, but we give them no reason to. So if you're going to go through confirmation classes, why don't you have them taught by the kids in the youth group? Why don't the high school students help plan and lead the confirmation retreat? You want a better bridge from confirmation to, whatever's next in the church? Have the people that are the bridge tenders do it. If you want kids to make a connection to the youth ministry, don't have the confirmation class in a stuffy old conference room in the church. Do it in the youth room. Do it in and around as part of what your youth ministry is doing. Plan missional events that if the youth group is going to go to serve at the soup kitchen, why not make that also a part of the confirmation expectation? Kids go or don't go to where they do or don't have friends and relationships. And so we need to help provide that relationship building, and you've got a much greater chance of them making the jump from, and in my head, I'm assuming, well, I see confirmation anywhere as young as 6th grade. Not a fan of that, but I love it better when it's like 8th, 9th grade, because there is that age of consent, that age of understanding and making a decision. But we've got to help them want to be a part of that ministry. So it's so easy to do that. We just don't think of it that way. And with a few little tweaks, you can structure the role of confirmation as a key part of the youth ministry and not just as an addendum.
Yeah. And that brings me to kind of my final question. Again, on the opposite spectrum, you have a lot of people that go to confirmation because it's expected of them, but what happens is they get confirmed and you never see them again. So what is it that we should be doing to engage them to be a part of the church ministry after after confirmation, so they don't just simply check out? How do you keep youth engaged?
Teenagers don't need to come to church anymore to have fun, or to meet that girl they like or guy they like or whatever, because honestly, they do all of that with this. They don't need the church for that. What youth will make the time for is if something has purpose. They know that the world is broken. Gen Z youth, they want to make a difference in this crazy world that's been handed to them. And the church is still trying to plan days at the roller rink. I don't know if kids ever go to roller rinks anymore, but anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. So if we want to keep youth participating in a church, I think connecting them to the life of what the church is supposed to do during the confirmation process, and even not just after, but asking them to do real things, not just pretend jobs. Pretend jobs are things like, oh, come and be a helper in the children's Sunday school class. Well, you know what? There is no sophomore, junior, or senior that's going to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday just to go help a kid color, if it doesn't have real purpose, they can smell a fake when they hear it.
And churches are really good about, oh, just have the kids do that. It's like,
oh, that's true. When they just want free labor, just have the kids do that. If you want true leadership from teenagers even, then put them as, put them in the real roles of responsibility. I know I'm talking crazy talk, but what's the worst that can happen? What if you apprenticed students, or what if you hooked up as partners students with someone else to be like the chair of this committee, or on the vestry? Really, what would be the worst that can happen? Now, maybe if they're teenagers, they can't sign legal documents. But, if you gave them real honest input and real honest responsibility in leadership, it might just do all of us old aging baby boomers a lot of good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you'd be surprised. I don't know. I mean, different churches have different policies, but in the Episcopal Church, for example, you can have technically anyone over the age of 16. That leads a high schooler to be a legit person on a vestry, for example. So why couldn't you seek out a high school person who could actually have a voice and vote, as a chance of a leadership opportunity?
Yeah, I think when we do that, please don't make that 16-year-old die of boredom coming to some dumb meeting where you talk about which light bulbs you're going to switch to in the fellowship hall. You know what? Just change the dang light bulbs and talk about something that matters. And that's going to keep a kid interested, because you're talking about something that matters, that makes a difference, and they want to be a part of this. Students today are as social minded as any have ever been. They just don't do it within the church, because the church puts up too many old timer. And folks, I am a baby boomer, so I feel like I'm speaking to my own. We put up too many roadblocks. We get in the way. And you know what? Teenagers today just go form their own 501c3 and do stuff. They're just leaving us behind, and we wonder what's happened to them. Well, let's give them real purpose. Let's support them. Let's be real servant leaders, like a conversation you and I were having, John, before this. Let's be real servant leaders and help that teenagers be successful at a passion of making a difference with the love and saving grace of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen. Well, I don't know if I can get much say anything more to that, other than I agree with you wholeheartedly about what can you do, but empower our youth to, again, go out there and share the love of Jesus Christ and do his work. And I hope that we're all aiming towards that. And Stephanie, I just want to thank you for your time of coming on here today and talking with me, and look forward to more conversations in the future.
Yes, this was fun. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. And for those of you, tune in next month for our next e-newsletter.